So one of the things, just from the point of view of having been in the bishops' meeting when this was decided by the National Conference of Catholic Bishops, our intention has been around evangelization. That's really where we're coming from. But this is a powerful, powerful evangelization tool that we have. And the need to first begin to launch it on a diocesan basis, and then to have parishes really begin to adopt this, knowing that there's probably only about 50% of Catholics out there that really believe in the real presence. That's the bishop having a heart attack in front of me. So, and then the need for us to come together as a national congress, to have a national congress together. And then the intention is that it doesn't stop there, that it will continue, because it is one of our most powerful evangelization tools. Really, really amazing, amazing. So I have been celebrating Mass for over 45 years now. And I have a priest buddy that's able to figure out how many Masses you've celebrated, over the years. I'm well over 20,000 Masses at this point. And the reason I got ordained to be a priest was to celebrate the Eucharist and for my own salvation. And I knew that's where it would be, there. And each of the priests, so Father Martin here, each of us, actually, that's our relationship with the Eucharist is central. Now, it's not the only thing that calls us into priesthood, but it is the thing that calls us into priesthood and calls us to really begin to form a Eucharistic relationship. So I shared with the two groups that the one that got me this morning was remain in me and I remain in you. It blew my socks off this morning, because having celebrated the Eucharist and having his body and blood in me right now, he remains in me and I remain in him, just like he remains in you. Wow! I mean, it's just an amazing moment, especially when you think of all the stuff that's going on out there and all the stuff we have to deal with. And yet, every time we celebrate the Eucharist, there's an explosion of grace that goes out. Explosion of grace. So a couple of moments I'll share with you of what's happened for me over the years. I remember celebrating Mass at Sacred Heart Parish in Rockport. I'd been a priest for probably over 25 years at that point. And this won't be in any kind of chronological order. It's just as the Lord's hitting me with whichever. And I had a moment when I said the prayer of consecration and was holding the Eucharist. And I don't know if y'all remember the movie, it's Raiders of the Lost Ark, and Raiders of the Lost Ark. And it's that moment in the movie when they open the ark, and there's just a tremendous lightning bolt that goes out. So that's actually the image I had when I held the Eucharist and prayed the prayer of consecration, that everyone in the church, plus everyone else in the parish, was getting physically hit with the lightning bolt of grace of God. Everyone. And I actually shared it with the community at the end of the Mass. And of course, then I had some people from the parish that weren't at that Mass that said, I wish I would have been at that Mass. I said, don't worry, it works the same. It's the same. It's the same. There's just, if we're open, stuff happens. If we're open, the Lord really does open heaven for us. Some years before that, well, really after that, my parents have passed away. My father would have been 100 years old yesterday. And he's passed now, I think it's about 13 years. And there's been moments since his passing, and my mother has passed now 20-something years, that both of them have been standing right next to me during the Mass. I mean, it's so powerful, it literally brings me to tears. Then they bring all their friends. So all the saints are around the altar. I mean, it's really wonderful. It's an explosion of faith, because we really do believe that it is not just a moment on earth, but it's also a moment in heaven. And so, yeah, maybe we've got one foot on the earth and the other foot in heaven, but I'll take it. I'll take it. And so to have that experience and the openness of that is really God's great love for us. Now, let me also speak to the wound that happens when we lose our loved one. Because when we lose a parent or a brother and sister or somebody we're close to, and we love them, there's a wound. There's a wound. That's what the Eucharist is about. That's what the Eucharist is meant to do. It's really meant to surround that moment with God's peace, God's love, and bring peace to it. So when we return to the pain of it, it's at peace. And that's actually what's happened for me when I think of my parents, and when I think of, I've buried 1,000 people at least over the years. And when I think of each of them, I buried both of our bishops, and I think of them. They're with us. They're with us with God's love. They're with us sharing the light of Christ with us. They're saying to us, it's all okay. They're saying to us, we are blessed. We are blessed. And God's love is very much with us. And so God does want us to be healed, especially of those wounds that we have that happen. Some other moments, this is a humorous one. So with those that come up for communion, especially the little kids that aren't able to receive yet, we give them a communion prayer. And the communion prayer is really meant to invite them to keep coming to the altar, so when they can receive, they can experience Jesus' love. And so the work you do, by the way, is important, especially those of you that are dealing with the munchkins up to 2nd grade, especially, and then the adults too. In any event, this one little group of kids came up, and it wasn't one of our schools, so principals out there, don't panic. Don't panic. And I usually stretch out my hand and say something like, God's love is yours, or experience the love of Jesus. Well, this little guy got so excited that he gave me a high five. All the kids behind him saw him. So you can imagine what happened from there. But, you know, in some ways, the little munchkins do get it. Because it is a high five moment. It really is. It is a high five moment. Now, our liturgists, you know, in the church would probably have a heart attack over that. You know, there's simple moments when the Lord touches. And we don't actually have to expect angels singing, bright lights happening, and you are now being touched by the Lord. We don't have to have that. Now that can happen, but it's more quietly when we are open to Him, really entering us and become one with us, that's actually where the change happens for us. That's actually where we fall in love with Him even more, no matter what's going on in our lives. It's part of the reason why at the beginning of the Mass we start off with, Lord have mercy, because we start off with our own sinfulness, our unworthiness. And that brings me to the story of, and some of you have heard it already, but brings me to the story of when I was about to be ordained a priest. I was within 1 week, and I was a transitional deacon at the time. And I still had a question that was just killing me. And that was, Lord, I know myself. I know when I get sick, and I know when I'm not really into stuff. I know when I'm tired, and I know, and I'm there at the altar, Lord, and I just don't feel worthy of doing this. And so that actually was my prayer through that 7-day, 8-day retreat. And about 3 days into it, I got my answer. And it was simple, but it also enabled me to say yes. And the simple answer was, it's okay if you're sick. It's okay if you're not feeling right. It's okay if you're out of it completely. I have promised to be there, and I will be there. Changed everything. Changed everything. Because there's actually been moments when I've celebrated Mass. There was one particular Mass I was celebrating in Spanish at Sacred Heart Parish. Had just finished giving communion, sat down at the chair, and passed out completely. And I wake up, and there's a policeman standing over me. And I'm thinking, I've gone to hell. And so they, of course, rushed me to the hospital, and I didn't have enough fluids, but there was a line of cars behind the ambulance all the way to the hospital. Anyway, poor souls, pobrecitos, they were so in shock. So stuff does happen, and the same thing is true for us. Now, yes, we need to be in the best spiritual position we can be when we approach the altar to receive His body and blood. And that's why we have the wonderful sacrament of reconciliation confession, to really enable us to get the healing we need, to really, really be open to His love. And then if we're working with anybody that's not really able to receive communion yet, one way or another, let's work with them, let's invite them, let's encourage them to be able to approach the altar and to receive His body and His blood.